And I am so excited to be here. Welcome to our first Let's Talk 2E Tuesday live panel featuring speakers from our recent Let's Talk 2E virtual conference for educators. If you're joining us live or watching the recording, just know that all of our Let's Talk 2E educator and parent conferences remain on demand forever on our website, letstalk2e.com or withunderstandingcomescalm.com. You can register anytime and watch anytime. In fact, we like to say watch what you want when you want, because we know teachers are so busy, and particularly now with virtual, hybrid, high flex, in person. I mean, I don't even know if I know what all these words mean, but I know teachers that you're feeling like you're doing the work of 2 or 3 or 4 people more than you usually are doing the work of 2 or 3 or more people. So the idea for tonight and our Let's Talk 2E 4-part series is to bring some of the conference speakers to you so you can ask questions and discuss important topics about 2E learners. You don't have to be registered for the conference to join our Let's Talk 2E Tuesdays, so feel free to invite your friends and colleagues. In fact, tweet it out there right now using the hashtag Let's Talk 2E. Take screenshots, post, whatever we need to do to get the word out about these free broadcasts to support teachers and help 2E learners. Okay, so I mentioned this is a 4-part series of Let's Talk 2E Tuesdays. They're always the last Tuesday of the month, and they parallel the 4 strands of our Let's Talk 2E conference: understanding 2E, classroom strategies, cultural diversity, and clinical considerations. Tonight, we're focusing on understanding 2E, and I have some wonderful experts and colleagues with me here today. So, Dr. Susan Baum, give us a wave. She is the director of the 2E Center for Research and Professional Development at Bridges Academy and provost of the Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity in Education. She's also the author of many books and articles about twice exceptionality, including her most recent, To Be Gifted and Learning Disabled. Her session at Let's Talk 2E was what me organized. It's a matter of style. That session taught us about the different ways of meeting executive functioning needs based on personality and preference. So we're gonna hear some questions for Dr. Baum in just a minute. Moving on, we have Dr. Matt Zakreski. Give us a wave. He is a clinical psychologist who specializes in working with children and adolescents, as well as their families, and specializes in giftedness and twice exceptionality. Matt's session, they're all going to find out that I'm a fraud combating imposter syndrome in 2E students, spoke to us about the very real doubt and perfectionism that can join together to cause 2E students to doubt themselves and underperform. Last and certainly not least, we have Diane Allen. Give us a wave. She is a mentor for visionary leaders. She hosts 2 podcasts, Someone Gets Me and Meditations for Visionary Leaders. Don't you love Someone Gets Me? I love that. Her session, I skipped something. I wanted to say that she's a prolific writer. She has 7 books published and 1 on the way about our topic tonight, spiritual sensitivities. Her session, The Way of the Sensitive, How Spiritual Giftedness Impacts Life Experiences, opened our eyes to another kind of giftedness and the importance of intuition and allowing gifted sensitives to lead with their hearts. And I guess even more last, and maybe not least, me. I'm Julie Skolnick, founder of With Understanding Comes Calm, and I guide and support parents, educators, and 2E adults, and I produce the Let's Talk 2E conferences, as well as publish the free online newsletter, Gifted and Distractible. So my keynote address, Understanding and Managing Transitions for Twice Exceptional Kids, talked about why transitions are so hard for 2E kids and gave strategies for making transitions less uncomfortable for everyone. So of course, you can find out more about all of us, as well as all of our conference speakers, in the exhibitor hall in the Let's Talk 2E Educator Conference. Okay, let's start with our questions that we have from our attendees and others who have sent us questions or will be typing them. And please feel free to type your questions if you're listening live on the Facebook page in our Teachers Lounge. So first question is for Susan. If a teacher has the opposite organizational style as his or her 2E student, is it okay for the teacher to teach his or her preferred organizational methods for classroom executive functioning?
Uh, yes and no. Some of them just are not going to be right. If we overload the system with a type of organizational system that is just anti how that brain organizes information, it isn't helpful. But teaching them a few uh, is also often a good idea. So that if a child's organization is very disorganized, teachers very organized, and a more of a sequential kind of organization, setting up the structure in the classroom where the pencils go, where you put your homework, and establishing those routines would be very comfortable for that child because it's part of that physical structure of the classroom. But trying to tell a child how to organize their homework notebook might be a disaster because it could be that that child never finds what he or she is looking for if that's not how they thought about that homework. So, for instance, if the teacher says we're going to arrange it by date, so everything will be in by date, so everything will be fine, and you organize by subject. Everything for English is in this part of my notebook. Everything for math is here. And the teacher wants it because she's so linear, date by date by date, and within that date in a certain order. You will overload that working memory, completely overload it, and cause great levels of anxiety. So there was a shortish answer to that question.
I'm going to follow up because I think this is so helpful. I bet teachers are sitting out there going, wait, what? Aren't I supposed to make them learn these linear steps? Isn't that the way we organize? What do you say to that, Susan? When, like, how do they address that difference?
I asked you, how do you organize your files on your computer so that you can find them? We all do it differently, and we try to use someone else's system, it does not work. And you can't sustain it. It's how your brain processes it, where that information goes into long-term storage. And if you have a certain way that schema where all these files, like I need to file by where I presented something. And I have a good memory. It's very contextual. It's experiential memory is how I remember things. So I will file it that way. And when I try to do it another way, all topics that have to do with style. Well, it's helpful to have it that way too. But if I want to remember a certain way that I did it, and it often is easier for me to think about, well, when did I say that? And that might not work for anybody else in the world but me. So for me to force this on you I don't even think it's ethical. I mean, I like to know everybody's system because everyone has something to offer. So I can adapt some of what other people do and I might find it very helpful. But don't change the the foundational way that my brain works because that's not going to work.
So it's really meeting the kid where they're at. And I'll bet almost every child above a certain age organizes their music somehow, right?
And they know where if they collect things, they know where that is. It's interesting because kids do know where the things are that they really care about. So I would rather say, well, how do you organize those things?
So you are totally reminding me of something hilarious from my childhood, which is that my mother kept a little box of index cards with phone numbers, like a Rolodex. But we would all tease her because we could never find anybody's phone number because they were done by the first name and then maybe it was by the last name, or if they were a doctor or if they lived in a town, or nobody could figure it out. So it was like a game we would play and ask her, like, where's this one? And how did you think of that way to organize them? So, but she remembered and knew where everything was. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And teachers, if you have follow-up questions, let us know. Diane, what is important, just switching over to a different part of the brain maybe, what is important for teachers to take into consideration about 2E kids' spiritual giftedness? I'm guessing that for some teachers, it was like, spiritual giftedness.
Right. Some people have that, they drop their jaw and they go, what are you talking about? But I think the biggest thing for teachers is to know that kids who are really spiritually gifted, first of all, may not know they are. They may not know that's a thing. And they're often afraid to say some of the things they're aware of because they're afraid they're going to get judged as crazy or taken away. So we want to create safety and keep asking the second and third questions, because that's how we're going to find out whether it's spiritual giftedness, or is it an imaginational overexcitability, or is it just something fun, or is there really something going on? And so the telltale sign for me with the kids is they know stuff that they otherwise wouldn't know. Usually it's really intuitive and really empathic, and they have a connection that is, you can't verbalize in words. It's tangibly different than their peers, or even than, you know, other people in the family. And so I always, you know, just kind of hang out and hold that space with them and help them see that it's okay, that that is a form of being gifted, and a lot of us have it, and that it doesn't make you crazy. It makes you really special and really amazing. And it's particularly, the other thing I want to say is it's particularly difficult for the boys. Boys really have a hard time. And I think it's societal. You know, boys aren't allowed to be sensitive and intuitive and empathic and all of that a lot in a lot of places. And so I'm working with a teenager now who's really struggling with admitting to anyone outside of like a few of us what's going on, because he's afraid he's going to get thrown away into some kind of psychiatric hospital because he has clairaudience. And what a beautiful gift that is, you know? So it creates, you know, it's time for all of us to understand that there's more going on. We're multidimensional beings. All of us have some connection differently. And these kids coming up, especially now, they're coming in with the multidimension more wide open. So it's our pleasure. I love being around them. It's really fun. So
in a classroom, if there's something that somebody might call an oversensitivity, or there might be a response to a peer, whether they're the intuitive person, the spiritually gifted person is sort of picking up on something, we have to take them seriously, is what I'm hearing you say.
Right. Absolutely. We take them seriously. And what I have them do is I have them write it down, because you don't always want to blurt it out in front of people or talk about it in class, but I go write down what you're seeing, and then verify it and confirm it. And so sometimes you just wait and let time go by and see, did it really happen or what's going on, and confirm that what you're picking up on is that it's not something made up in your head. It's real intuition. And so I teach them this skill to do that, so that they can verify it for themselves, that yes, what I am seeing and picking up on really is something that's a little different and unique, and it's totally valuable.
I can imagine, as with all overexcitabilities, if you're sort of shut down and shut off, that it could have really pretty detrimental effects on your self-confidence, and really affect also emotion regulation and all sorts of other things, and then spin out into something that doesn't look anything like where it started.
Right. I find a lot of the teenagers I work with who are trying marijuana and different kinds of things to shut it down, that when they finally get away from that, in comes the spiritual giftedness. And most of them, I have 4 of them now I'm working with, and they're all boys. And I have a lot of girls with it, but the boys really have a more difficult time, like coming to grips with it, that it's a thing and it's valuable. And so I watch for that. When I see the dissociation, or I see the checking out, or I see the complete dismissive, thinking that intuition is about a religion, because it's not. And, you know, that, oh, I can't talk about that stuff or whatever, then that's where I really pay attention, that there needs to be an open dialogue that's in a really safe place, so that this child doesn't continue down that shutdown road. And then we end up with a bigger challenge here. You know, we don't want to have that happen.
So switching gears, but kind of tangentially related, right? If you suddenly are doubting yourself and your spiritual gifts, that might be something that might fall under the umbrella of imposter syndrome, which is what Dr. Matt talked about. That imposter syndrome and doubting yourself and feeling like you can't possibly be as good as some people think you are, you once were. So Matt, is it important for teachers to help kids understand their own imposter syndrome, or should they just try to like avoid talking about the imposter syndrome and go toward the encouragement route and help them feel more capable in their learning?
Yeah. Well, so, and the last thing you mentioned, Julie, right? The encouragement thing, when we're in our human space, we're like, well, of course don't feel this way. Look how awesome you are. Look at all these things. I have a wall full of trophies and awards and plaques. But that doesn't work for imposter syndrome. I mean, it's like trying to hold water in a colander, right? It's like, woo, comes right out, right? So, but we can't ignore it. So instead of trying to solve it for our kids, what we do is we name it, we make space for it. We bring it into the room and we say, hey, this looks like one of those times your imposter syndrome is showing up. And if that's true, let's talk about some strategies that we can use to figure this out. It's not, you're having imposter syndrome, so here's what you do, Tommy. Because then Tommy's going to say, like, oh, look how much of an imposter I am. The teacher needs to save me. But we also can't be like, Tommy, buck up, dude, right? You know, grit your teeth, be a man, or whatever that looks like. So the idea here is, you know, I'm working with a young man right now who, while he's a naturally talented dancer and an actor, and I mean, he's you should see him move. He's brilliant. And he has crippling stage fright. I mean, and it's really, it's an imposter syndrome thing that's manifesting that way. So his director is like, I cast you in this role for a reason. You should be here. He doesn't believe him. And so instead we're saying, well, why don't we approach it this way? All you can do with this right now is try to live up to your own expectations. What do you think you can do? And he says, well, I shouldn't be the lead. I should be running the lights. Cool, run the lights. That's important. Well, I mean, I don't want to run the lights. Oh, you don't want to run the lights. What do you want to do? Well, I want to have a small part. Okay, well, then you can be in the background. You can be tree number 3. Oh, I don't want to be tree number 3. Oh, okay, what do you want to be? I mean, I want to have some lines. Oh, so right. So what we're doing is we're having him defend the negative, right? And the more we engage with him around this, what do you really want? What's your own expectation? We find that he's moving closer towards what actually all the grownups in his life want for him, but he's getting there on his terms. And that's ultimately with imposter syndrome. It's measuring yourself by your own yardstick, getting all of those dialogues and standards out of your head and trying to be in the moment as best you can.
Getting there on his own terms. That's kind of like the theme for tonight, right? Whether you're embracing your own organizational style, you're celebrating your spiritual, intuitive self, or you're finding out what you're really capable of. The idea is that you have got to be able to be yourself. So I have a question for me. I feel like I should be like this, you know, talking to myself, or I should be in 2 squares. I don't know. Anyway, so I understand from your presentation that ideally we should plan ahead for transitions. But what if you find yourself in a situation where you need to transition now, in all caps, coming in from recess or switching classes or when there's a substitute? What are the strategies for in the moment? That's a great question. Thank you for that question. So ideally, that situation is going to happen one time. Why do I say that? Because we need to know who our kids are. We need to find out, you know, if you have a kid who has a hard time transitioning, you know that kid. And some of you have heard me say this before, but I love to say it. Find the hardest kid to love and love him the hardest. And make that space for him. Get to know that kid so that you know what to expect. And then lean in, okay? In the moment, the first time it happens, well, all times, validate what's going on for that child. Ask what can make it better or easier in that moment. But the best bet really is to plan ahead, and you're gonna use the exact same strategies. Validate what's going on and ask what can happen tomorrow when the substitute's there. After recess, when it's time to come in. You have to prepare, you have to plan, you have to ask them you might think you know what the issue is. Well, they don't want to leave their friends. They're playing on the playground, but maybe there's something else going on. Maybe after recess is math, and math is challenging or an area of disability or learning difference for this child. So maybe that's why. And so we have to find out what's going on, because that is what's going to lead us to what are the best strategies. Okay, so let me just take a look at the chat to see if, okay, we have some questions here. So and by the way, let me say thank you to Victoria Rose Super, who is the behind the scenes technology fabulousness person out there chatting your questions to us and making all technology work. So thank you, Victoria Rose. Let's see. Okay, she's asking Matt to share the name and title of 1 to 2 books about imposter syndrome that all teachers or principals should read.
Oh boy. How much time do we have?
I think she said 1 or 2 books.
1 or 2. Okay. So, I'm not going to read in dozen to that. So my go-to is Why Do I Feel Like an Imposter? That's Dr. Sandi Mann. Sandi, Sandimann. That to me is, if you're going to get to like sort of what does this feel like, right? Trying to tap into that empathetic space, that's where I'd start. And then for my leadership, my teachers, my administrators, my mental health professionals, then I would go to The Imposter Syndrome by Harold Hillman. Harold Hillman is, he's a world famous leadership coach, and he gets to the idea of what does that mean writ large? What does that mean for your organization if you're up night thinking sooner or later the fraud police are going to kick in my door, right? So I think it's both from Sandy's book for the individual experience, Harold's book for the top down. That's a great place to start.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for that. Similarly, Susan, same question. Share the name and title of 1 to 2 books about twice exceptional that all teachers or principals should read.
Well, of course, I want to say To Be Gifted and Learning Disabled.
This one?
That I wrote with my colleague, Robin Shader and Steve Owen. This is the 3rd edition. It's very different from the first 2. Each edition is quite different from each other. But that is all my work I've done over the years. It's everything that I know, although I'm ready to also update it again because we're working on a bunch of interesting new things. And it's the latest research, and what's nice about it is that it's not an edited book. So one chapter leads into another. But the other one I would recommend is an edited book, and that's by Scott Barry Kaufman, called Twice Exceptional. I think it's for strategies for creative and gifted kids with learning disabilities. I'm not sure of the tagline. And that is done by all these people, especially who are involved with how to identify these children, what are good classroom strategies, how to look at WISC profile. So in that book, it's a very nice collection of the writings of a lot of people who've been in this field for a while.
Awesome, awesome, thank you. Diane, is there a survey or inventory that can help determine spiritual giftedness, or is it something that people just notice?
Yes. Most of the time people just notice it first. In my book that's coming out, The Way of the Sensitive, I have an inventory in there for people and parents and whoever wants to take it to kind of see, to get a flavor of it. And most of the time it's just something we know, like I know things other people don't know. That's one of the things that is the hallmark, is the person knows something other people don't know, and up until I was in my 20s, I thought that everybody knew what I knew and could see what I saw. And then I woke up in college and went, wait a second, hold on, there's something else going on here. So it's paying attention to that I know something other people don't know.
Cool.
And then when the book is going to be out in about a month or so, you can take the quiz in that book if you'd like.
Awesome. And you'll update your exhibitor booth in the
yes.
conference. So, okay. Susan, how can teachers plan assignments around different types of organization styles?
It's about the kinds of instructions that you might give them, as well as what you're asking them to do. And so some kids who are extremely linear, I call them practical managers, they are most comfortable if there are very specific directions given and the task is more concrete than not. And there's a clear set of expectations. Rubrics would be great to supply for those kids. The more comfortable they are with what that they understand what that expectation is, the more willing they'll be to go through step by step by step. On the other hand, if you have kids who are more scholarly, or I call them learned experts, they will not be happy with such specific directions. They want room to think. So they would rather think about an assignment that is more conceptual, that allows them to synthesize ideas, allows them to come up with their own theories and check other people's theories. So as concrete as that first group is, this group is that abstract. The kids who are more creative, and I call those creative problem solvers, and that's their personality, we really need to think about how many open-ended kinds of assignments do we give kids. I don't think we do. People think creative, they think I better do the arts. And that's really not what I mean at all. Those kinds of brains, or that organization, it reminds me a little bit, Diane, of what you're saying. Ideas just come to you and you don't know how, in a way. And they are such divergent thinkers that they make connections between concepts that are up in their head, and they don't know why that combination is working. And so they might not even know where they're going initially, but I never forget the worst thing that a class I ever had. They said, I want you to list 5 great ideas that you got from this course, which seems like a pretty open-ended assignment. Do you know the teacher marked 2 of them wrong? How could they be marked wrong if I came up with that idea, that because you gave me this wonderful thing to read, that I got this great idea from it? So I think that in classrooms, we don't understand what open-ended really is, and that there's no one right answer. And I want to be able to do things in a multitude of ways. So as much as we think we understand creativity, teachers really don't. And they think if they give the kids a project, that's what creativity is. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So do you have to give different assignments to different kids every time?
Some of the time. I like to have the project to be more open, more choices, because kids need to flex. You're not always going to be wanting to work in your own style. And we're not one thing. I have a profile. And right now, and my profile is, the shortest one is the practical manager, but I'm really very sequential some days. And when I have to write a grant, I have to be particularly linear, and I need to be able to use all aspects of my mind. But if you want me to be happy and you want to get the best of me, let me be creative for you, that kind of thing. And the people persons, if you allow them to work with others, and to allow feelings and emotion to be part of that assignment, you're going to find some really good things happen with those kinds of assignments. But we're all more than one thing. And so I don't worry about the just right assignment all the time, but give choices that are truly different from each other and not just different versions of the same choice.
And since we're talking a lot about sort of leaning in and asking kids to help us understand what's going on for them, is that a good idea for teachers to ask students, here's what I want to know that you learned. How do you want to let me know?
Yeah, why not? And I think too, when you think about personality styles, you can't predict ahead of time that I'm going to pick the one that's my style, because maybe I won't. That I'm so intrigued with this other assignment and I really want to dig into it. And so it's not give the kid a label and here's the prescription. It's not that at all. It's just that we have to watch ourselves to make sure we're not only assigning one kind of a way to express what you know. That we vary what we're asking kids to do, ask their opinion, give some choices.
Awesome. Okay. Matt, how can teachers talk to parents about imposter syndrome when they suspect their student is suffering from it?
Oh, so that is a tricky question. And it's a conversation that needs to be handled delicately, because like a lot of things in the mental health sphere, there's a lot of misinformation out there about imposter syndrome, right? So the idea first is to open a dialogue, right? If a kid is feeling imposter syndrome at school, it's likely they're feeling it somewhere else, right? Imposter syndrome is seeded from a place of feeling different. And we know our kids, right? The more neurodivergent you are, the more aware you are of your own difference. Our kids know that, right? Our kids can articulate that. I'm definitely not like the other 8-year-olds. I'm doing calculus in my spare time. So it's opening a dialogue. Hey, I'm seeing these things with Sally at school. And it seems to me sometimes she gets really stuck and she'll say things like, I don't belong here, or, is it good enough? Is it good enough? Is it good enough? That sort of coded language around imposter syndrome and perfectionism have a lot in common. So it might be safer to open the door with perfectionism and walk through it. See if that's showing up anywhere else. Is it showing up in homework? Is it showing up at soccer, ballet, hockey, flugelhorn, whatever it is Sally's doing in her spare time? And I would bet dollars to donuts that parents are going to say, oh my gosh, she said all the time at ice skating that, why do people think she's a good ice skater? And say, yeah, I'm seeing that in math class XYZ. Now we've aligned because we're sharing a dialogue. If you come at this, I think your kid's got imposter syndrome, your natural inclination as a parent is to throw up your defense shields and go, no. Who are you? You don't know this, right? So it's about knowing the kid, right? There's no one size fits all for imposter syndrome, but the traits that sort of drive it are things you're going to see in the classroom. So if you start talking about traits to parents, I think they're going to join you in that part of the dialogue.
Right, to compare, what do you see at home is what I'm seeing.
Matthew, can I ask a quick question? Do teachers sometimes, because they're not specific about what you did well, a lot of these kids get A+, this is great, excellent, rather than saying, you expressed, you really understand that character. Look at the words you use to explain that mood. I'm really impressed. I think we as educators contribute to the problem sometimes.
Oh, we totally do. And it's funny because, my imposter syndrome just flared because Susan Baum just asked me a question. I know what I'm talking about. It's fine, right?
I'm learning from you. That's where I got this idea. One of the things I learned from this session.
That is why Susan Baum is Susan Baum, because she's always learning.
So if we think about it this way, right? It's a lot of these kids will fly under the imposter syndrome radar because they're getting A+, right? But then the idea is to check in with your kids who are getting those A+, or first chair in the orchestra, or leading the play, all-star soccer. And the vital question for me, the question that always unlocks imposter syndrome is, how do you feel about what you just did? Do you feel joy or do you feel relief? And there's a young woman that I worked with. She has sailed through public elementary, middle, high school. She's getting ready to go to college. And I asked her that question the other day, and she gave me sort of the stock answer. And I'm going to reflect on something Diane said, asking the question a couple of times, right? Because I was like, no, that was too rehearsed. I'm like, no, seriously. She's like, I haven't felt good about anything I've done in school since 3rd grade. I said, what happened in 3rd grade? 3rd grade is when, interestingly enough, she left Montessori school to go to public. And she's like, it's every time it's like, I dodged a bullet, or I survived this gauntlet. And so she's in a position academically that we're spending the rest of her senior year experimenting. What do you want to learn? Can we turn that passion back on? Right? And we know that one thing our kids have in great supply is passion. So, passion is antithetical to imposter syndrome, because passion makes us take big leaps, big actions, big movements, right? I don't know if I can audition for a play, but I'm going to give it a shot, right? In those moments, we are living our authentic selves, and thus leaving imposter syndrome behind us. It's likely to show up because anxiety is sneaky that way. But then we can reflect back to those moments. When did you feel engaged, passionate, authentic? Because it's likely not on your history chapter test, right? That's another box to check. It's another task to do. And your kids are able to get hundreds on those, but they're probably not doing it from a place of joy. Can we make some tweaks to help them find the joy in that again?
Well, and I think the interesting thing too is the word lazy, which we hear a lot about kids. And so maybe the kids you're talking about are doing well but unable to tap into the passion. I really worry about those kids, and I worry about the kids who aren't doing well because they are just so frozen in time and can't make that effort, or are afraid to fail, or are afraid that if they do well that they're going to be expected to do well again, and that uneven profile, and that lazy. I'm just going to dare say that no kids are lazy. There's something else happening. Okay, so Diane, how might spiritual giftedness affect 2E learners in the classroom? Are there certain assignments that teachers can create that would address and feed a 2E learner's spiritual giftedness? Ooh, I love that question.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind is expansion, and having expansive creative opportunities, and being willing to go into the story with the kid and see what they're coming up with. And that works really, really well. And because if they're empathic and they're picking up on all kinds of energy, you want to also be very aware to their emotional state. Because like, I have a kid I'm working with right now that the best way to describe him, he's usually really hyper and happy, but he's been having a lot of malaise because of what's going on in our culture. And it's because he's picking that up. So I'm teaching him how not to take it on. It's not his. So there's lots of skills that we can teach these kids to say, I see this, I know this, I understand this, and whose is it? Is it mine, or is it the world's, or is it Johnny sitting next to me, or is it the person behind me? I tell most of my kids to sit in the front of the class because there's less distraction from the energy of the kids in front of them. Like, I always sit in the front for that reason. Otherwise, I'm seeing this, I can feel that, I'm over here. And pretty soon the teachers, I can't, even if I want to learn, I can't because of the distraction energetically. So I teach them to sit in the front and focus as much as they can on what they're doing. And then as they're getting information, to write it down. Like, I've written a whole page of notes already from today of insights that have come in during this. And so it gives it a document, it gives it a place. And then a lot of the times teachers and parents can look at it with them. I have one child who draws everything. It's beautiful artwork. And so just draws it all. And then it's just a story. It doesn't have to be figured out. It doesn't even have to be understood, but it has to be valued and seen as something that has great value. Because in these kids, what you're going to see is they might have one like big insight or one big burst of something, and then it'll be quiet for a while, and then another one. And it's when you put them together that the magic happens. So I always teach them it's like a big jigsaw puzzle, that you might have this really great awareness this day, or you see something this time, or this thing here. And it's when it all comes together that everybody goes, wow, that's amazing. And it's coming in pieces. And also the other thing for teachers and parents really to be aware of is the kids know if your energy is off before you do. So if a kid asks you if you're okay or something's wrong, and you're not aware of your own place or whatever, they're probably more right. And so I have to work with people like that. The kids will know way before most adults that something's going on somewhere. I had one kid who alarmed his teacher about a student that was about to be violent in the school, because they could feel it. Something's wrong with that kid. Something's wrong with that kid. And then the teacher believed this other kid. And then they got the principal and everybody involved, and everything was fine. But that child really was picking up on something was wrong. And thankfully he was heard, and it was validated, and nothing bad happened. So to be aware that when you have kids that have these kinds of connections, that they are going to say things that might seem weird to us, or coming out of nowhere, but it's not from nowhere. It's very, very real. So I always pay attention.
I appreciate that so much, because so often our 2E kids are told to stop, redirect, do something different, and are often tried to be, put in the proverbial box. And A, we miss so much by trying to do that. B, it's only going to fuel the challenging behaviors that make it hard to teach. And C, it's really hurtful to not be able to be your true self. So we have just about 5 minutes, guys. This has been awesome. I have a general question to ask, just in general, that I want to throw in there, which is, if a teacher is a beginner to the world of 2E, okay? And folks, those of you out there listening, if you're like, wait a minute, what is imposter syndrome? Then you need to listen to Matt's session at Let's Talk 2. If you're wondering, like, what the heck was Susan talking about, all those different organizers? Isn't it just organizing? Or if you're wondering more about spiritual giftedness, all of these really amazing sessions were in our, and more, were at our Let's Talk 2E conference. But if a teacher's a beginner to the world of 2E, what one thing do you think they should learn about or know about 2E learners? Where do they start? What's that one thing they really need to pay attention to? You guys, I'm going to let you answer as it comes to your mind, what you want to share.
Well, I think if teachers decide to focus on what kids can do, the whole class, and stop paying attention to what you think they can't do, the whole climate will change. And when you see kids at their personal best and you're paying attention to what they can do, Diane, I like what you said, it has to be valued. You have to like the fact that this child can act out anything and maybe doesn't write as well, but that's important. And when you see these kids shining, give them more of that. Recognize it, value it, and do more of that. And you will start creating that learning environment that in which kids can begin to be emotionally available to learn.
I love that, emotionally available to learn. Really important. Okay, Diane and Matt, anything?
Safety. The thing that comes to my mind is safety, and it goes with emotionally available to learn, that our children need to feel safe and that we trust them and that we can be trusted so that they can be themselves. And if you're a new teacher out there, we're all seasoned experts. We didn't just land here. So start learning and start reading and listening things. Listen to all the talks in the Let's Talk 2E. Go to all the conferences. And I kind of like open yourself up like a funnel and just keep letting in the information, because there's ongoing research, there's ongoing understanding. We all see it presented in different kinds of ways. And your classroom is not going to be the same from day to day, year to year. So if you really care about the 2E conversation, which you wouldn't if you weren't here, right? Then really get out there and just start learning everything you possibly can. Like, I always love to listen to other people who have things to say, and I always get something. Even if I know part of it, I see it differently or whatever. So to be open, and most of all, be that safe person for these kids so that they don't grow into teenagers and into adults who think that they're flawed when they're not flawed.
Ooh, tough act to follow, Diane. Thanks for that. Well, so to my educating people, first off, you're doing an amazing job. And even by watching this, you're doing an amazing job, right? Give yourself credit for what you're doing. The biggest thing for working with 2E kids is meeting them where they are. And this is where we get into the idea of asynchrony, right? You might have a kid who's intellectually in high school, but emotionally is in grammar school. And not getting frustrated by that split, because the kid is feeling the tension of that distance, right? You know, how is it? The example I use all the time is, I worked with an 8-year-old once who was doing graduate level calculus work at the University of Pennsylvania, by an Ivy League school, but he couldn't tie his shoes, because oftentimes gifted kids struggle and find motor skills, right? That's a delay in asynchrony. So if I got mad at him for not being able to tie his shoes like a grad student, and I'm not even sure what that looks like, you know, probably not even affording shoes, honestly, you know, then I'm losing, not only am I losing the kid, but I'm losing my ability to reach that kid. So it's the idea of where are you today? Where are you right now? And you start there. I'm having a tough day. I don't know if I can math today. Cool. Don't math today. I want you to sit here. I want you to doodle. I know you're going to listen. I know you're going to take stuff in. I want you to work with me and communicate with me to tell me what you need. But it's always returning to where is your kid right now? Go there, and then we'll walk forward together.
Awesome. Well, you guys, this has been Understanding 2E, and my final question, the way that I want to answer it, is I'm going to say this. I want you to think of 2 words when you're interacting with 2E kids. It is honor and respect. If you are coming to anybody and everybody with honor and respect, then you're going to give the benefit of the doubt. You're going to be available. You're going to feel to them like you're trustworthy. And whether or not you're identified as spiritually gifted, we know that 2E kids know from moment 1, or maybe before moment 1, what that grown-up is thinking about them.
Oh, yeah.
So it is so important to know that whether or not you're trying to hide it, they know. So honor and respect. Well, I have to thank you guys, my good friends, my colleagues, people I love to learn from. Susan, Matt, and Diane, thank you for being with us. Teachers out there, oh my goodness, go put your feet up and do something for you, because we know how busy you are, and we're so appreciative of your dedication to the 2E learner. So thanks, everybody.